Hello, I'm doing a movie review, and the movie I want to review is the 1976 horror classic, The Omen. Now, The Omen was written by David Seltzer, or Seltzer. I'm not really sure how to say his last name, but he would go on to write another excellent, yet lesser-known horror film titled Prophecy, not to be confused with the Christopher Walken film of the same name. Now, the movie is directed by Richard Donner, who would go on to direct movies like Superman, and he kind of directed Superman 2, but he kind of had that project taken away from him. He also directed The Goonies and Lethal Weapon and Scrooged. Now, this was not Richard Donner's first film, but this is definitely the film that sort of shot Donner into the mainstream. Now, The Omen came out in the wake of the success of The Exorcist, and this movie gets compared to The Exorcist a lot because both films are extremely influential, and both films deal with the devil, but honestly, I would say this movie has more in common with Rosemary's Baby than it does The Exorcist. Now, even though I don't think it's fair to compare this movie to The Exorcist, personally, I do think The Exorcist is a much better film. I don't know, I just personally like the story for The Exorcist better. I get more of a sense of pathos and drama from The Exorcist, and once again, it's not really fair to compare the two movies because they are completely different movies, but personal taste-wise, I do like The Exorcist better than this film, even though this film is arguably scarier than The Exorcist because the film is a lot more nihilistic than The Exorcist, and technically the stakes are a lot higher in this movie because this movie is actually dealing with the end of the world. But once again, personal taste-wise, I just think The Exorcist is a better film. But that's not taken away from this movie. This is still a great movie, an excellent movie, honestly. Even though I don't think it's a flawless movie, there are a few things here and there in the film that I don't think exactly hold up 100%, but overall, it's still a great movie, and it deserves its place in horror movie history. Now, I actually have somewhat of a special relationship with this movie. Now, I didn't actually see the movie for the first time until I was 12 years old, but I've known about this movie since I was 8 years old. When I was 8 years old, that was when I first started really getting into horror movies, but at that age I was mostly watching, like, the old classic horror films like Frankenstein and the Wolfman and Creature from the Black Lagoon, but I've always heard about this movie, but this is the movie that my mother always told me I was never allowed to watch. She would always say, "You're never allowed to watch The Omen," so this was sort of like a forbidden movie that, like, according to her, I would get, like, nightmares for years or something. So I didn't actually see the movie until I was 12 years old, and when I was 12 years old and I first saw this movie, I thought I was such a badass, like, yeah, I'm watching The Omen, what are you gonna do about it, Mom? And when I first saw this movie at the age of 12, it definitely creeped me out, but it creeped me out on a much different level than a lot of horror movies I was watching at the time. It actually creeped me out on sort of a spiritual level, believe it or not, because when I was 12 years old, I was actually really thinking about religion and stuff like that, and I actually was seriously thinking about, like, do I believe in God, and, like, does God even like me? Like, I was actually worried about things like going to hell and stuff like that when I was 12 years old, and I know those are really sophisticated ideas for a 12-year-old to be thinking of, but believe it or not, I was actually thinking about shit like that when I was 12 years old. Like, the age of 12, that was the age where I really started to think about religion and stuff like that, and this movie affected me on sort of a religious level, and it creeped me out on that level. This idea of eternal damnation and how horrifying that actually is. And I remember when I was in middle school, I was talking with one of my teachers who knew I was really into horror movies, and she said something about this movie that I thought was really interesting. She said this movie really put the fear of God into her. And watching this movie, especially watching this film at age 12, when I was thinking about shit like that, it really did give me this sense of spiritual and religious terror. Now, I can't say the film necessarily affects me on that same level now. However, the thing that interests me most about this film really is the politics of this movie. This is a very, very political film. Now, the plot of The Omen is it follows this man named Robert Thorne, who is a man who comes from tremendous wealth and power, and in the beginning of the film, he finds out that his newborn son has died, and he doesn't want to tell his wife about this, so he ends up adopting a baby boy in secret and then telling his wife that this is in fact their son. And they end up naming this boy Damien. The movie then jumps ahead to years later, and Thorne ends up becoming the US ambassador to Great Britain. And then on Damien's 5th birthday, his nanny kills herself in front of everybody. Later on, Thorne is confronted by this seemingly crazed priest who knows that Damien is not his biological son, and this priest claims that Damien is in fact the son of Satan himself, and he claims that when Damien is an adult, he will bring about Armageddon. Now, Thorne, of course, doesn't believe any of this at first, but soon he's forced to confront the horrifying truth that his adopted son is in fact the son of Lucifer, and his son is destined to take everything that he has. Now, in the movie, Gregory Peck plays Robert Thorne, and he does such a good job in this movie, and Thorne is a very sympathetic character, because you really do get a sense that he genuinely loves Damien, even when he finds out that Damien is in fact the son of the devil. He still loves the boy, and he's put in this horrible position where he realizes that the only way to save the world is to kill this child, and that's not a position that I think any normal person would want to be put in. Do I save the future of mankind, or do I spare the life of this little boy? And you especially feel bad for him when he gets this, sense of doubt, where he wonders, okay, is Damien really the Antichrist, or is this all some horrible mistake? In the movie, Remick plays Thorne's wife, Catherine, who is also a very sympathetic character as well. Especially when she starts having these seemingly supernatural experiences around Damien, and she actually starts to fear Damien. She starts to fear what she believes is her own son, and you feel so bad for her, especially when she starts to question her own sanity. And what makes the movie really kind of heartbreaking is you see that her and her husband have a great relationship with each other, and also seem to have a great relationship with Damien. They genuinely love this boy, and it makes it heartbreaking when it's found out that this is actually a demon in a child's body, because it just gives you this idea that this happy family unit was all some farce or something, and that's, to me, is the most horrifying thing about the movie. Or one of the most horrifying things about the movie. In the movie, David Warner plays a character named Jennings, who's a photographer who starts helping Thorne uncover the mystery of Damien. And Jennings might actually be my favorite character in the whole movie. I thought he was a really likable character because he's just some normal guy who kind of just gets pulled into this whole situation. And honestly, I thought David Warner and Gregory Peck had great chemistry with each other. And some of my favorite moments of the movie are the scenes where Thorne and Jennings are out trying to figure out exactly what Damien is and what's to be done about Damien. Now, Damien is considered to be the villain of the movie, but honestly, I don't consider Damien to be the villain of this film, because Damien, in my opinion, like, my personal interpretation of it is, Damien doesn't even know he's the Antichrist. He doesn't even know how important he is, and he really is kind of innocent to all this. And when supernatural stuff happens around Damien, my personal interpretation is that Damien is more so using his powers on sort of a subconscious level, like he's not even aware of what he's doing, or it's actually his father, Satan, at work whenever you see supernatural things happen around him. And really, Damien does not directly kill anybody in this movie. Really, the villains of this movie are Satan himself and Damien's second nanny, because in the movie, after Damien's nanny kills herself, he gets another nanny, and this nanny is actually a disciple of the devil, and she's sworn to protect Damien no matter what. And once again, I don't personally consider Damien to be evil. If anything, it would be the devil who will make him evil in the future, but I don't think Damien at this stage in his life is actually evil. Now, for me, one of the most interesting aspects of this movie really are the politics of the film, because this is actually a very, very political movie. And in the film, there's this little poem that says that the Antichrist would rise from the eternal sea, and in the movie it's interpreted that the eternal sea is actually the world of politics, that the Antichrist, that the son of the devil, will rise from the world of politics. In the movie, it's implied that when Damien is an adult, he will become a politician, possibly even the president of the United States, and that's how he will bring about the end of the world. In the movie, it's very much implied that when Damien does get to a position of world power, he will cause a nuclear war, and it's this whole idea that the devil's apocalypse would not be the devil, like, unleashing an army of demons upon the world. Rather, the devil will use our own weapons and our own hatreds against us. And one thing I really do appreciate about this movie is, even though this is a supernatural film, this movie, very much like The Exorcist, is a supernatural film that's still sort of grounded in reality. Now, I did mention before that I don't think The Omen is necessarily a flawless movie. There are little things about the movie that I don't think hold up so well today, mainly the makeup effects in this movie. Honestly, some of the makeup effects in this movie are actually pretty bad. Now, Jerry Goldsmith did the score for this movie, and he actually won an Oscar for the music in this film, and I think he definitely deserved that Oscar. At the same time, though, there are little moments in the score where I think the score is a little too bombastic when it could benefit from being a little more subtle, especially given the tone that this movie is going for. But I would say, in general, it's a very good score, and at points the score is very creepy, but there are little moments in the movie, or little moments in the score, I should say, where it is a little too bombastic. But yeah, despite those minor problems I have with the film, overall, The Omen is a fantastic movie, and if you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend it. Now, this movie was a huge success when it came out, and the movie ended up spawning a franchise, which included 3 sequels and a remake in 2006. This franchise also spawned a TV series titled Damien, which aired on A&E in 2016, but the series only lasted 1 season. This franchise also spawned a book series. Now, the first 3 books in the Omen book series were actually just novelizations of the first 3 movies, but after the 3rd book, the series kind of went off in its own direction. The movie has also been spoofed on Saturday Night Live and South Park. But yeah, that's my review on The Omen, and my next movie review will be on Damien, Omen 2.